Couple people I want to thank. I just got to do this really quick because this is an important day for me. This is an awesome event. Jane Ray crew, Pin crew, Interstate Office crew, the Denny Sanford Premier crew. You guys know where you're at. Can you just blow the roof off for those folks really quick for me? They put on an incredible show. Man, very, very cool. All right, take a journey with me, okay? I'm going to set the stage a little bit. We're going to do this in like two parts. And I feel like that's important. I want to give you guys context on what I want to take you through. Some of this is going to be a little bit information-based, and some of this is just going to be some reflection, some story. So back in 2021, I was able to stand on a stage in CultureCon and do a really important, really special thing for me. And that was close a chapter of my life, right? Some of you were there, some of you might remember. It was a cool talk. I got the chance to stand up here and say some pretty vulnerable things, talking about my struggles, some of the things I'd been through, some of the things I was working on. It was my version of the process back then. And that was really important. And after that, I kind of had to redo this whole process thing. And so today, I just want to talk with you for a little bit about what my process has been. Because today, and maybe very, very soon, I'll be closing another chapter in my life, which has been a very incredible, very rewarding chapter, but this is more than likely going to be the last CultureCon that you see me up here as a member of the Think 3D team, because I'm making some transitions and some changes in my life. Audible gasp from a couple people. No, Vani had just mentioned we've been doing life really intimately, really closely in our work, in our personal lives for the last 5+ years. And I've had the absolute privilege of getting to see this community grow, seeing our business grow, seeing our team grow. But I'm in a pretty remarkable place, doing some pretty remarkable things for me, and that is going to require me to make some different choices, some different decisions, and build my reality in a little bit of a different way. And I think that you should expect nothing less than that for yourselves, right? So we're going to build this process together, and we're going to go back in time a little bit. So 2021, I shared about some of my process, some of the things I was learning, right? One of the core things that really took me through that chapter, and as I was closing it, I reflected on stuff that I learned. And one of those things was a quote by Marcus Aurelius. And I get it, like, I don't know, Stoic philosophy sometimes gets misused. Like, it's a lot of cringe posting on Instagram with like a picture of a lion and then like a quote, or like a post-gym picture with like a really just out of context quote. But this quote stuck out for me in its entirety, and it was really, really important to me because I understood now how to apply certain things. And so I want to walk through this a little bit because this is where the building blocks came in. So the quote is, "Stop wandering about. You aren't likely to read your own notebooks or ancient histories or anthologies you've collected to enjoy in your old age. Get busy with life's purpose. Toss aside empty hopes. Get active in your own rescue if you care for yourself at all, and do it while you can." If you were around in 2021, you remember a few of the things that I talked about. One of the things that stuck out to me after CultureCon, having to kind of figure out a new way, was these two phrases: stop wandering about and get busy with life's purpose. After I stood on the stage and talked about all the things I had done to get through difficult times and still maintain like a really good professional track record, a really impactful career, I started to realize that process wouldn't work anymore. I had to figure something else out. And for me, purpose was something I was a little bit murky on. So I became extremely enamored with this idea of purpose. What does purpose actually mean? What does it actually look like? We talk about it a lot in a general sense. And I got really hung up on this idea, and I knew I had to do something different. The next thing that stuck out to me was toss aside empty hopes. I really like the way Marcus Aurelius words that, because hope kind of is, to a degree, empty, right? I feel like hope without action leads us to disappointment. Everyone's going to know what I'm talking about when I say this. If you don't, you're lying. It's like that bag of spinach you buy with really great intentions. It's full of micronutrients and dreams. And then 4.5 weeks later, you have a slimy bag of shit in the bottom drawer of your refrigerator. Hope without you doing something about it is a lot like that. And in 2021, I was auditing kind of just, for lack of a better term, my refrigerator, right? I was looking back through all these hopes and dreams I had, which were rapidly turning into disappointments. And I was like, this won't do it. This is not the move. I had to do something different. So there it was. I was like, I knew purpose was important. I knew I had to get active. I had to start making different choices, better choices for me, which landed me on this idea of autonomy, right? And we're going to unpack that later, but that's where this concept really started. And the last couple of things that stuck out to me was get active in your own rescue if you care for yourself at all. Meaning, and this is the analogy I shared in 2021, you have to do something, right? You have to be doing something in order to even have any chance of moving forward, of being rescued, etc. And that doesn't always mean you have to do it on your own entirely, but you should operate with the mentality that if I don't call for help, if I don't, I use the analogy of being on a large body of water and your motor on your boat kind of blows and you're stuck in the middle of the water and you're like, I better throw a paddle in the water and get after it. And you're not going to be able to go as fast as you can go with your motor. And at some point, there might be some water coming in the boat. And that's when I realized I developed a really good skill of getting really good at things quickly. Like figuring out how to paddle really well and figuring out how to bail water out of the boat really well. Which led me to this thought. Anything worth doing is worth doing well, right? Like, I think even if you are just bailing water out of the boat, be the best damn bailer of water that you can be. And I landed on this idea of mastery and the pursuit of it. And it kind of put these pieces together for me. Okay, I really got to figure out purpose, right? I really have to figure out how to make different choices. I'd like to explore what true, healthy, like really remarkable autonomy looks like. And I want to be in the pursuit of mastery in every aspect of my life. And I was like, okay, I got to do something different, right? For a long time, I was focused mostly on outcomes. And I struggled with the phrase, trust the process. In fact, I thought it was BS. I thought it was a platitude. It kind of felt sometimes like trust the process was a verbal, like pat on the head. Or maybe like a really, somebody's really bereft and grieving and they need a full embrace, and trust the process was like, oh, it'll be all right. There's plenty of fish in the sea, right? Because I didn't have a process that was truly mine, so it always felt like I was a little bit out of control. And sometimes I can probably imagine some of you felt like that. When someone says trust the process to you, it kind of feels like you're just white-knuckling it on a roller coaster. It's like, that's not that fun, because some of us don't like roller coasters. And this is where I started to change my perspective. And after CultureCon 2021, I was like, this process has to change. It was kind of like a hall pass, right? I was using my old process, the struggles I had gone through, the things that had held me back as a hall pass. And I should have already graduated. I had no business hanging around. And I had to start over. But I didn't exactly know where. These are the things I did know going into that. One, the process is the point. I had to realign my perspective on process versus outcomes. We're going to talk more about that later. But the process is the point. I was so focused on the disappointment that I wasn't where I wanted to be, I had completely ignored the really, really cool and remarkable way I'd gotten there. Had to shift my perspective. Second thing I learned, and actually I don't know if this gentleman's in the room, but there's a phrase I want you all to learn and explore on your own after this. But this is a phrase, ugly grace. I don't know if Adam Martin's here. I know he was maybe planning on coming, but if Adam Martin's in the room, if you don't know Adam Martin, you should. Adam probably doesn't know this, but he's been very, very impactful for me, just getting to know him, his authenticity, his genuine leadership, the way that he speaks. Adam's the CEO of an organization in Fargo called F5 Project. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail about what they do, but if you in any way, shape, or form find the work that we do with LOT, JI, and some of that stuff impactful, I guarantee you will resonate with the work they do. But Adam introduced me to this idea of ugly grace. And having to start over again, I thought, what does this actually look like? And I explored it. And it's really cool. So the basic premise is this. Grace, when applied appropriately, is not graceful. Grace, when you actually give it or when you receive it in the way that you should and the time that you should, it's typically ugly. It's inconvenient. It's not neat, right? Back to that quote from Marcus Aurelius, get active in your own rescue if you care for yourself at all. And in order to care for yourself at all, what do you need to give yourself? Ugly grace, right? Grace when you need it most. You need to figure out a way to love yourself through some of the challenges, some of the growth, some of the messiness of the process. So I knew that. I also knew that goals don't equate to purpose. Vonnie and I actually just had a conversation about somebody he knew, and this isn't going to be a super long thing on mental health, but the reality is I'm sure all of you know people who have been very goal-oriented in their life, and those goals haven't been fulfilling to them. We just had a conversation about a young man that he knew that unfortunately passed away, took his own life, and this was a very accomplished, very goal-driven, very winning, right? As far as he's winning, he's stacking up the goals. There wasn't quite something there, right? And coming out of CultureCon 2021, again, that was super cathartic. It was great. It wasn't it, because I had a lot of goals. I was still cloudy on my purpose. So I was starting to figure out, hey, you've got to start writing a new chapter, and you have no idea what it's going to be about. Where do you go from there? So here's what I knew. I knew that trust the process did not mean that I wasn't in control. I also knew that trust in the process means that you trust the actual work you're doing on a day-to-day basis to get you closer to where you want to be. I think we should challenge the phrase. When we say trust the process, I think what we should really be meaning is trust your work. When you don't feel like you're making progress, trust in the work that you're doing on a regular basis, because trust in the process also means that you believe in the fact that what I am doing will allow me to wake up better every single day, just a little bit, even when you don't feel like it in the moment. And that's what I knew. That's what I started with. But I still had no idea really. I had some missing pieces. I wanted to explore purpose. I wanted the next chapter to look totally different. And this is where I happened upon this belief, this realization. Sometimes in order to figure out how to write the next chapter, you got to go back and reread the old ones. You got to flip through all the stuff that you had done in the past, and you got to see, man, what was going on at the beginning of the story? And so that's what I did. See, I had really taken kind of a large marker and redacted a lot of my past. I had thrown a lot of it out because it was riddled with things like disappointment and regret, and I didn't like that. I didn't like the way I handled that, and I didn't like that experience, and I had a lot of that. And so what I did is I had to go back, and I had to fully declassify certain things and reconnect with my process and my journey. So that's where I was, right? So let's take a trip down memory lane. You guys ready? Two of you are ready. Excellent. Great. You guys are doing terrific. Okay. Early on, this is me as a kid. I was a pretty cute kid. Nobody say, what happened? I know. I've heard it. I was a pretty cute kid, but I was adopted. And me over there looking like a character from Peaky Blinders is I'm not shaking people down for money, although it's probably not far off. That was taken outside of the Los Angeles County Courthouse as I was going through the process, very lengthy process of finalizing my adoption. This lovely critter over here is Bud, which stood for Big Ugly Dog. Probably explains my affinity for animals and dogs in this way. This was me looking back and really reconnecting with the great parts of my adoption story, which for many years I had only hung on to the super difficult parts, the parts that kind of pissed me off, the parts that bothered me, the regrets, the confusion. And man, I look back at this stuff and I was like, dude, there was a really happy kid in there, right? It was a really cool thing. And then I hit my preteen years. Listen, okay, some kids are really into sports. Some kids are really into music. Some kids are really into comics. My entire life, every memory, every photo, every person in my life that I can remember, they all knew one thing about me, and there was only one thing I was really into, and that was guns. Typical boy, right? Well, maybe, depends. For me, that was very typical. You put any sort of stick, any sort of pipe, any sort of tool, even the wrappers from the gift paper wrapping in my hand, and I immediately would find a way to go storm a beach, clear a house, like the abandoned lot next to my parents' house. We would storm the beach every single time. This was the one thing that my entire life, I would really say, sparked joy. Honestly, if you knew me, which most of you didn't because I grew up in a very different part of the country, if you knew me from 5 to 20, this is what I was all about. This was my passion. This was the one thing that sparked a joy for me, right? Some people really like fishing. Some people really like, again, whatever it is. This has always been my thing. And then I had to go reconnect with some relationships, and I re-examined that part of my life. So up here, while we're strolling down memory lane, I wasn't going to spend that much time on these, but this is my family. I got 2 adopted sisters. They're the biological daughters of my adopted father. I have a brother-in-law over there, both wearing black. Ironically, his name is also Dan. That is one of one photo that exists of me on a golf course, because that is one of one time I have ever been on a golf course to golf. Probably not hard to tell by looking at me, I don't really belong there. So in doing this, again, folks, I looked at all of this stuff with a different perspective, right? What could I get out of this? What process was I learning? What sort of things could I emerge from this purpose? And it changed the way I looked at relationships. It changed the way I looked at the connection with those family members. And to be honest with you, and I'm super happy to share this now, 3 years later, like after doing some really intentional work for the last 3 years, my relationship with all those people is way better. We didn't really have a super consistent, super great relationship, but I've reconnected in some very healthy ways, and it's been super hard, right? But it's been really, really important. So I was exploring, right? I was going down kind of this memory lane, thinking about all the things, like, man, where was the purpose? Where was the joy? Where was the fire? Where did it fall off? What happened? And then I emerged on some different memories. Again, you're going to notice a trend. Some people are really into sports. I used to spend a lot of time, energy, and effort and resources because I love marksmanship, I love the sport, I love the discipline of it. I'm going to talk a little bit about more of the components of that in a second, but I loved these things. They brought me true joy. They ignited my fire. And I had to like really think about, hey, how do I get back into this? How do I start doing certain things for me? And that was something that I was toying with, right? In the professional sense, I was having a great time. I was doing my thing at Think 3D with LOT, with CultureCon, with all of our clients, all the things that we're doing on a regular and consistent basis. And that's where the idea of like pursuing mastery really started to ignite for me. How do you engage in a process, and what is needed to go into a process so like you feel like every single day when you wake up to do your work, pursue your craft, pursue your hobby, whatever that thing is, you're doing it in a way that's masterful. And I fully dove into that. And then another chapter of my life started. That is my unbelievably gorgeous wife, Rebecca. She's not here today, but I don't have enough time. I would probably sit up here for the next half hour and talk about her. I am a better man because she's in my life, and this is where the idea of ugly grace and like really finding a way to love yourself or find someone that will love you in the way that you need to be loved is super, super important. Now, I'm also not the kind of person that believes that you need another half, right? I think that you can be a whole person on your own. However, when you find that person that makes you better, hang on to him. Be like, hey, I want to do life with you for as long as I can, please. Because she was able to help me understand and fully embody ugly grace because she gave that to me, right? And that was something that really helped me, again, working through that idea of autonomy. Get active in your own rescue if you care for yourself at all. And it's hard to do stuff for you if you don't care about you. So I had to realize, man, this is really good for me. And through a lot of our conversations and through her support, I continued down this path. I was like, okay, how am I building mastery? How am I pursuing autonomy? And how do I really connect and illuminate true purpose that's really, really powerful? And so over the next couple of years, I fully dove in. We started making more content. I started getting heavily, heavily involved in the training. And I tried to pursue this discipline, this skill of being a facilitator, a coach, a trainer, a speaker, a leader, as fervently as I could and intensely as I could. And honestly, like I think now I've clocked over 2,000 some hours doing this. I've gotten decent at it, but it still wasn't the move for me, right? That wasn't my thing. I was still missing something. And that's when I started to have conversations with Vonnie and Tamian about stuff I wanted to do outside of work. I started to have conversations with my wife about some of the things I really missed and I wanted to do. And that's when, probably about 2 years ago, I really dove in and started to get back into the things that brought me joy, the things that like turned my soul and my heart on fire. And it might look strange, you might like whatever, but I'll tell you what, there's nothing more that actually like, again, ignites me internally than being out here practicing this sport, practicing this discipline, coaching other people through it. And this integration fully past, present, future, personal, professional, potential, all the stuff we talk about at Think 3D, I integrated it fully, right? And I was able to then make these chapters really make sense. And so this pursuit, and it sounds nebulous, we're going to talk about it and bring it down to earth in a second. I truly think that through the pursuit of mastery in something, I don't care what your thing is. It could be your work, it could be your hobbies, it could be your relationships, but through the pursuit of mastery and really embracing autonomy, meaning caring for yourself in a very proactive and healthy way, you will find an engaging and illuminating purpose. And I'll tell you what, for 30 some odd years, and for the first time in 30 some odd years, there's a young man, and it's kind of ironic because I didn't plan this. This is just, if you know me, you know, but there's a young man right here wearing a black hoodie standing on a range. And there's a much older man over there wearing a black hoodie standing on a range. And for the first time in 30 plus years, I think that little guy is super proud of the guy that's over there on the far right of the screen. And that hasn't always been the case. And this is, thank you. Awesome. Right? And so this is where I landed. I landed on this idea of how do you develop mastery, autonomy, and purpose through the pursuit of these things, right? So let's break it down really quick. Mastery for me has historically been thought of as an end state. And I don't want you to think about mastery as an end state. What I want you to think about mastery as is a process. My definition of mastery is the action or process of mastering a subject, accomplishment, or skill. And in anything I do, I want to be able to do it masterfully. I want to be able to do it to a degree where it's excellent. And this is what I think of. And this is honestly stuff that I use when I'm talking about training people at work. Right? I do organizational development, I facilitate, I coach people, and some of the things that I share here is the same exact things I share there. And one of the things that's important for me when pursuing mastery is you have to value the process over your outcome. In performance psychology, we have this system, and many of you are probably familiar with it, but we have outcome goals, performance goals, and process goals. Outcome goal, I want to win a state title, right? Performance goal, I got to increase my free throw percentage from the line. So my process goal is to shoot 100 free throws a day. Well, what do you think most people fixate on the majority of the time they're going through that? If they're thinking about the state title, or they're thinking about that free throw percentage mark. But the reality is, where does our focus actually need to be? Because where does the work happen? It's in the process, right? In order to pursue mastery, in order to really unlock a process, we've heard about a lot of different people's processes already today. One of the most important things you can do is value the process over the outcome. The next thing you should probably look at doing is how do you practice? Practice intensity. Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book called Outliers. I'm sure a few of you have read this book or heard of the book, Outliers, where he talks about 10,000 hours being the mark for mastery, right? That's since been kind of challenged and debunked to a degree, and here's why. Let's just be very incredibly honest. If you do something for 10,000 hours, but you're half-assing it, what are you going to be good at the end of that 10,000 hours? Half-assing it. So you have to practice with a level of intensity and stress, right? This is where I talk about my experience at Think 3D over the last 4 or 5 years. I came in and I was decent. I was decent at training, I was decent in front of people, but I came in and I had to work alongside two of the best speakers and facilitators that I had ever seen in the business, and that was Vonnie and Tamian. And this is one of those things where I tell people, when you want to get really good at something, practice it at a speed that makes you slightly uncomfortable. If you are pursuing mastery, I do not care if it is in a skill, a sport, your craft at work, whatever the case is, try to work on practicing that at a speed that makes you a little bit uncomfortable. The reason is that's going to expose all the little things you want to work on. It's the best training tool. It's the best teaching tool. The next thing for me is competition creates confidence. We're competitive at Think 3D, but anytime you do something, you can stand somewhere, and I talk about this, in terms of either being in a competitive environment for marksmanship, and if anyone has done any like USPSA type of stuff, you know what that looks like, but there's no substitute for someone standing behind you with a timer and you having paper targets, which you can't lie about, and you have to be measured in your accuracy and speed. Nothing like competing creates that confidence. In my pursuit of mastery, I figured out, you know what I really need to do to accelerate that? I got to compete more. And it's the same thing in any aspect of your life. This is not just about a specific sport or discipline. Gamify the things that you want to be great at. You want to be a hell of a parent? Guess what? Find a way to make it competitive for yourself. Gamify it, right? You want to be great at work? Find a way to make it competitive. Competition creates confidence. The next thing that came in was capacity and baselines. And this one's very simple. If you want to increase your capacity, you have to increase your baseline. A lot of us look at process as a way to increase our threshold at the very top. And the reality is when human beings, when we're really pressed against it, when we are stressed out, what do we tend to do? Do we rise to the occasion? No. We default down to our baseline, right? The only way to truly increase your capacity is to elevate your baseline. And one of the only ways, right, in my opinion, one of the best ways, I should say that, is to, one, focus on the process, not the outcome. Practice with intensity and find ways to stress yourself through competition so you can build confidence. That will increase both your capacity and your baseline. So there it was. I deployed a lot of those things over the last 2-3 years with intention, with really, really incredible results. The next thing for me was autonomy. Also a big word, but it's part of my process. And I look at autonomy like this. The right or condition, and I really want you to focus on the condition aspect, because a condition is a state of being, right? The right or condition of self-government, freedom from external control and independence. There's a couple of things that I think are really important. One of the realizations I had when talking about autonomy was, again, thinking back to that quote, get active in your own rescue. If you truly are operating with autonomy, if you are autonomous, especially the condition or the state of being autonomous, what that means is you have to be articulate. You have to articulate what you need, what you want, what you don't. If you cannot call for help, or you are unable to call for help, you won't receive it. And so for me, autonomy has to be ran through this lens of, am I articulate? Can I articulate the things I need? Can I communicate those to the people around me? The next thing for me is regulation. Self-governing means I'm able to regulate myself. I've heard it put this way, it's a thermostat, not a thermometer. One is reactive, and one is a little bit more predictive. Super simple, a lot of us have heard that, but part of truly being autonomous is that. Am I able to self-regulate and understand that I need to go gather the tools, resources, things like that? From a mental or emotional health perspective, this looks like going to seek out the things you need to do. This looks like also considering, how do I truly develop insight about me? And here's one of the biggest things for me, key takeaway. If you want to develop insight and you want to develop insight fast, run every single one of your experiences through the filter of reflection. Experience plus reflection equals insight. And insight, in my opinion, outweighs intel, because intel is great. Emotional intelligence is awesome. Emotional insight is having a little bit more context on where, why, and how. So I worked really hard in developing insight, because the more insight I developed, the more reflective I became on all of my experiences. I was able to be more articulate. I was able to self-regulate more effectively, making decisions and ultimately making better choices. And this is part of autonomy, being able to choose. Now, when we talk about autonomy, I'm talking about choosing for you. What does choosing for you mean? Does that mean only doing the stuff I want to do? Does that mean only doing the stuff that's super fun or feels easy? No. Choosing for you and choosing for me looked and sounded a lot like making difficult choices. Much like the difficult choice to say, hey, in order for me to pursue the things that I want to pursue to an extremely high level, I need to make a change to my working reality, right? And sometimes that's the part about process that we don't always like to think about or consider, is it might take us to places that are, again, very difficult. We might have to choose that. And that's part of autonomy for me, is choosing things for me, understanding based on the fact that I tried to be as reflective as possible. I developed a lot of good insight so I could articulate and regulate the way I wanted to, and I had to choose something that was good for me to be able to maintain that. So it's this pursuit, right? It's a condition. We're trying to pursue the condition of being as autonomous as we can. We self-regulate, we articulate, and we choose things for us that are going to be good for us. And the last thing, purpose. Purpose is defined as, or at least the way I like to define it, is the reason for which something is done or created or for which something exists. This is a lofty one. This is a big one. But for me, this is really, really important because this is where this stuff comes together in a way. And for me, I think about process as something that helps illuminate purpose. Through an intentional process. And it doesn't have to be my process. It can look a little bit different. But through an intentional process, if you don't have one, it's a little difficult to truly fully illuminate your purpose. I think that process gets you closer to that. And when I say illuminate, it sheds light on it. It lights it up. It makes it easy to see. It makes it visible. This is where I come back to goals not being enough. Right? Goals should help you fulfill your purpose, just like process helps you illuminate it. Right? I'm going to go on a quick side note with purpose. It's easy for us to talk about purpose, but it's important for me to be purposeful. And this is a nuance, but it's an important distinction. If you're going to be purposeful with your actions, meaning everything that I do should in some way, shape, or form contribute or take me closer to my purpose, you got to start looking at your impact and your intent. And so this is a little bit of an aside, but it's super important for me that people hear this and understand this. You cannot defend or mitigate negative impact with positive intent. If somebody comes to you and says, you had a negative impact on me, this thing you did, this thing you said had a negative impact, if you rush to grab positive intent and say, well, it's okay because that's not what I meant to do, you have to square with the fact that that action wasn't purposeful. And so while finding your defining purpose is really, really important, before we get there, I think it's important to understand impact and intent are things we have to constantly be evaluating. If you keep missing, if you're like, man, that was an unintentional conversation, man, that was an unintentional interaction, don't just reach for good intent. Be purposeful. Those are two things we need to understand and recognize. And in your organizations and on your teams, and I would be remiss if I didn't add this note because this is kind of the world I live in, it's no different. Hell, even in your personal life, the people you love, the people you do life with, you cannot defend a negative impact with positive intent. However, maintaining an attitude of positive intent and trying to truly act with positive intent does have a lessening effect on your negative impacts if you're the person receiving that, right? And so it's kind of a balancing act. I have to be mindful of my intent, and having a purpose is great. Being purposeful is really, really important. This leads me to the last kind of thing as we land this plane a little bit, right? So what did I learn along this journey since 2021 of trying all these things? I got back into some skills and hobbies. I got back into some disciplines. I completely changed up some of the dynamics of my relationships with family for the good. Did a lot of intentional work. And here's where I kind of landed on purpose. This is kind of one of the things for me was really impactful. That trip down memory lane wasn't for no reason. That trip down memory lane was to find really bad pictures of me as a kid doing the things that I have and always loved. Tone talked about it earlier, right? Being somebody that the younger you would be proud of. And I don't know where everyone's at in the room. You guys might be like, Dan, this is great, but I got all my stuff figured out. I'm good to go. Awesome, good for you. For the rest of us that are here in reality and are kind of constantly working on it, tell you what, you might have a moment in your life where you have to figure out or realign or reacquire a sight on your purpose. How many of you guys have been there? You have to readjust something, reconfigure. A couple of years ago in 2022, a very, very well-built, very good-looking man named Manny Gutierrez stood up on here on the stage and talked about fan the flame, right? And you might not have been here for that. The context was Manny was a coach for years. And he talked about in young athletes, fanning the flame. And it was funny because that sparked in me a thought. And he doesn't know any of this. That's okay. Where's my flame? And that might be kind of hard to hear. Like, we talk so much about intentionality and impact and purpose and leadership. I'm going to be super candid with you guys. My flame had kind of started to flicker on some of that stuff because it wasn't necessarily aligned with the things that truly, at the end of the day, lit my heart on fire. And so, based on this idea, based on this concept, I decided to look for the smoke, find the flame, and I had to figure out what things set my soul and my heart on fire. And then I dumped gasoline all over those things. If you're looking for a way, maybe you want to level up, maybe you want to break out of a pattern, maybe you want to go into a different role or a different organization, go find the stuff that sets your soul on fire and fuel it. That is the one surefire way I know how to help elevate and find your purpose. We have to be doing those things. So let's get ready to land this plane. In my opinion, folks, the point is to wrestle with your process. You should have one. You should constantly be working on it. Big, lofty ideas like mastery, autonomy, and purpose, those are not end state things. Those are iterative and they're nonlinear, meaning it is messy. Ugly grace is super important for yourself, for other people. You have to figure out how to deploy it. But the point is to wrestle. I don't know where everyone's at. You might be in a really good spot like me, where your life is awesome. Things are amazing. Things are humming. And that is the point, because that's where we want to be. But it's not a done thing. It's not static. We have to wrestle with it. Mastery isn't an end goal. In my opinion, mastery is an active, continuous refinement. So in a couple minutes, I'm just going to share a few things for me that I think are critical for following the map. Consistency, commitment, and investment. Here's my thoughts on this, and I'm going to give you guys just a couple of quick things. Consistency for me. I'm big on this. If any of you guys have been in a session where I actually teach and we go through, you are a client, you've been in an organization, or you're a member of an association, you've heard me say this. I'm big on principles and techniques. When you want to establish consistency, figure out the principles rather than spend way more time tweaking and retweaking techniques. There's a lot of different ways to shoot a basketball. If you focus on achieving the key principles to shoot a basketball well, you're going to be better off. But guess what? Your shot might look different than mine, and that's okay. Right? Also, it's the same way with communication, having difficult conversations or anything like that. If you want to achieve more consistency, figure out what the principle is. I talk about the principle with people sometimes with communication, like, hey, you need to be able to figure out how you can actually get dialogue with this person. If you've been in any of our training, you know that to be the case. How do we dialogue well? Well, dialogue requires an exchange. It requires somebody to be open. So rather than saying that there's one school of thought, like, man, you got to wait 24 hours to have that conversation, or if you do wait 24 hours, you've missed the boat, depending on what school of thought or what technique you've been taught. The reality is that might not fit the situation. You might have to wait 3 days. If you ever raised a teenager, you know, are they ready to talk to you at the end of the day after dinner, at the dinner table? No, they want to talk to you at 10 p.m., 11 p.m. when you are ready to go to bed. But that conversation might have to happen then. So, with consistency principles and techniques, so the thing that I like to do, and this is a technique, is I set a ceiling and a floor for everything that I do. What do I mean by that? I look at a morning routine. I'm just going to use a morning routine as an example because it's quick and we can all relate to it to a different degree. My ideal morning routine looks like I get up, I start the coffee maker, I do 30 minutes of some sort of exercise or activity. And then I eat breakfast, I start drinking my coffee, I do some accuracy stuff, I do some dry fire, I do some vision training. I'm trying to get back into my competitive and practical marksmanship stuff at a high level, so I would do that for 30 minutes. And then I would maybe listen to something. So there I'm up to an hour and a half, and then I get dressed, I get ready for the day. Now I got 2 hours at the start of the day that's intentional, it's filled with the activity I need, and it gets me closer and closer to the end goals I have. That's my ceiling. Am I going to get to do that every single day? No. And it's super, super easy for us to say, screw it, in the morning when we don't have the perfect thing. Without a ceiling and a floor, we're missing out on consistency. So I set a floor. 15 minutes, I wake up, start coffee, I can crank out 50 push-ups, 100 push-ups, I can crank out some squats, I can listen to some stuff, and I can do some quick vision training, and I'm on my way. Because what have I achieved? I've done that consistently, right? So one of the things for me, mastery, autonomy, and purpose, if you're trying to pursue stuff to a level of mastery, which I think you all deserve that for yourselves, establish a ceiling and a floor. Super simple. The next thing for me is commitment. A couple of quick things on this. We talk about this, so this is not new to people who've been with Think 3D, but commitment for me, quick side note, commitment looks like doers only, meaning I try not to take too much feedback, advice, criticism, or hold too much weight from people that I would consider high opinion, low commitment. There's no good in that. High opinion, low commitment means I talk about a lot of stuff, I have a lot of thoughts on certain things, but my commitment's not there, the activity's not there. What does commitment sound like? Commitment sounds like this: I will, or I am going to. It's strong language. You know what commitment doesn't sound like? Oh, it'd be cool if. You know what would be awesome? We should just, I always hoped this would happen. What did I say earlier about hope? Hope without action is like a stinky bag of spinach in the bottom drawer of your refrigerator. It just doesn't do you any good. And so commitment truly sounds like these things. I made a commitment to myself that I am going to pursue these things. And honestly, over the last 3 or 4 years, my work has improved, my personal life has improved, my aspirations have improved, my connection to my purpose has improved. Last thing for me really quick is investment. Time, energy, and effort, folks. If you want to pursue a process meaningfully, you should do so with time, energy, and effort. Really consider, where am I placing these things? It doesn't have to be a monetary investment. It doesn't have to be some big thing like my stuff is. I chose a very expensive hobby. But it has to be an investment of time, energy, and effort. That's the only way that I have learned to follow my map. Now, this process isn't perfect. In fact, this might not be the end-all, be-all process for me, but this is just my version of it, which is kind of cool, right? I get the opportunity to really work things out, to try stuff, to excel at things, to become really, really good at things, even though that process isn't perfect, and that's okay. If you pursue these things, refine your process to a level where you feel like you're pursuing mastery. Anything less, I don't think is good enough for you. I know a lot of you in this room, I think you're all super valuable. I think you all deserve nothing short of the pursuit of mastery for yourself. Because what that looks like embodied, it looks like, for the first time in my life, being able to say, that little dude over there is super proud of the man that's standing in front of you. And it might not look exactly how you thought it did one day, but I guarantee you that the pursuit of mastery and autonomy will create the confidence and skills you need to illuminate, pursue, and ultimately fulfill your purpose. If it's not a hell yeah, it should be a no. Go find what sets your heart on fire, go find what sets your soul on fire, and fuel it. Over the last 5 years, you guys have had the opportunity and the privilege of watching our process, watching all of us grow in very different ways. Me, our team, and it's been awesome. You've gotten to watch it in its imperfection, you've gotten to watch it in its evolution, in its iteration, and it's been great. So for that, I say thank you all, because I don't know when the next time that I'm going to get to sit up here and talk to you guys like this will be. So I wanted to say, 1, thank you. 2, trust your process, trust the work. And 3, go be great. I look forward to seeing you guys again one day soon. Thank you.